Dear students, let us start the discussion on today's newspaper, that is 1st September 2016. The first article is related to the advancement of the budget. You all know that budget is presented on the last day in the month of the February, and by the time the budget entire process is finished, it comes around May last week. In the process, vote on account budget is accepted first. Vote on account budget means for 2 months of the entire budget proposals, 1/6 of the budget proposals are pre-accepted. So in this scenario, what we can say is the advancement of the budget can improve the quality of the public expenditure. The reasons are this: because vote on account budget is passed for the 2 months, and it means that May, June, it will be on vote on account budget. Then the rainy season starts, infrastructure projects will not move on. And finally, in the last quarter, we are spending the highest amount of money. Sometimes it is often described as the March rush. So this advancement, by this we can eliminate the vote on account budget. By the time the entire budget comes to the executive, so a new annual year starts in India. So that's why it will be an economically efficient move. But however, the data constraints will be there as we are calculating the data from, based on February last week estimates. So we need to push for the early data. That's the only constraint in this. Now coming to minimum wage law. So now, if you take about in 1948, a committee was appointed on the fair wages. According to this committee, there are 3 types of wages. So the minimum wage law among this is the lowest. So these wages are living wage, a fair wage, and a minimum wage. So a minimum wage is the lowest wage in this. So this has a statutory backing. So the Minimum Wages Act provides for the statutory backing. So in 1975, the Labour Committee, it has clearly stated certain criteria which have to be taken into consideration towards bringing in minimum wage or determining the minimum wage. To this criteria, in 1991, so the expenditure that is need to be incurred for child education also need to be added. That's what is the Supreme Court has said. So if you take these 5 criteria, such as the consumption of 3 minimum people, and food requirement to the tune of 2,700 kilocalories, clothing requirement of 72 ads for a family, and then finally the electricity, fire, lighting, and all these things, if they are taken into consideration along with the child education, so the existing, it has to be around 26,000 rupees per month. But however, if you see the situation of the contract workers in India, they even work at the meager wages of around 5,000 rupees per month. So, in this scenario, the permanent workers who are the part of the formal employment, they are very minimal. And after reforms in India, the contractualization of the employment has increased. Because of this contractualization, exploitation also has increased. Now coming to the Republic of Unreason. So what do you mean by this? It is talking about the surrogacy law. So you all know that the surrogacy regulation bill, it was introduced in the parliament. The cabinet agreed for the introduction of it in the parliament. So what are the major provisions of that? A couple who are not having a child after marriage for 5 years, so they can go for surrogate or surrogacy as a route to have the children. If they have any adopted children, they are also ineligible for the surrogacy. It prohibits the surrogacy for the foreigners and homosexuals, people, single parents or single divorced individuals, and also to the live-in relationships. So in this context, the article analyzes the morality. The first one is, every person has a right for the procreation. So he can create his offspring and based on whatever the method he thinks is feasible and he likes. So obviously the surrogacy can be recognized as one such a method. And second, woman's right to bodily integrity. She can make the decisions with regard to her body, that is, either to rent a womb, that is based on her free will. And third thing is, it also cannot stand to the constitutional scrutiny. If you take Article 14, equality, equal protection of the law, if any 2 equal persons need to be differentiated, the differentiating criteria has to be rational. So it is not clearly explained why the homosexuals and also the people living in or within live-in relationships are being excluded from this. So that's why there are certain criticisms with regard to this particular surrogacy law from the moral and legal dimension. And coming to India-Africa relationships. Now, healthcare cooperation and knowledge cooperation, it can be a strong reason for India-Africa cooperation, because there is an young population in both the countries. The health profile of both the countries is same. There are communicable diseases and the non-communicable diseases are growing. And relatively, West do not spend much on the research in reference to the communicable diseases, because so the prevalence of those kind of diseases is very less over there. And added to that, the healthcare expenditure is very less in both countries, that is less than 1%. So in this scenario, the pharmaceutical industry is very much developed in India, and the generic drugs produced in India are the reason for fighting the HIV/AIDS in the case of African countries. So the healthcare can be a strong foundation to build the India-Africa relations. Turkey's dangerous move on Syria. So now, if you see the Turkey, so there are Kurds in Turkey, and also there are Kurds in Syria. So these together are demanding for Kurdistan, an autonomous Kurdistan. So these Kurds in Turkey, these are being recognized as the terror elements by the Turkey. Now the Syrian Kurds, these are actively fighting against the ISIS, and America is providing the air cover for the fight by the Syrian Kurds. So in this context, the Syrian Kurds have occupied an important towns such as Kobane, which are between the Turkey-Syrian border. So initially Turkey has kept itself away from this Syrian war, and its support was majorly to the rebels, so the opponents of Mr. Assad. And the second thing is, the strengthening of the Kurds was an irritant for this Turkey. So Turkey is sending its forces to fight the Islamic State now. In the name of the Islamic State, what it is actually going to do is, it is fighting the Syrian Kurds who are very active against the Islamic State. So in this way, the Turkey is about to complicate the existing civil war and the crisis in Syria. And coming to Gangetic dolphins, these are the endangered species. Uma Bharati gave an explanation that the pollution is the reason for the blindness of the Gangetic dolphins, leaving that fun apart. So the Gangetic dolphins have got no eyes because of, over a period of time, they lost their eyes because of evolution, because they have to swim in a muddy waters. That is the reason why. So they stopped using their eyes, or they started closing their eyes slowly. It has led to the loss of the eyes. That is the evolutionary explanation. Then how they communicate, or how their other senses function. So generally, based on the echoes, sound echoes, they try to communicate with each other. And second thing is, that is, they navigate using the sound waves. Now, the rods and cones, which are the important part of the eye, they still are there in the Gangetic dolphins. It uses those to determine is it a day or a night. But however, so the eyes are never opened, eyes are being degenerated in Gangetic dolphins. And coming to the census, as per the 2011 census, Muslims are the least educated and Jains are the highest educated in the country. So added to that, as you go up in the hierarchy in education, Muslims are much least educated. Around 2%, that is 2.76% of the Muslims are educated at the graduate level. Now these are the articles for today. Thank you very much. All the best.